I don't think anyone else is here. Oh, how do we do this? Okay, I'm making sure that YouTube, are you grabbing my stream, honey? No, you're not. Oh, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. I hear something going on. No, you're not. No, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. Oh, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. Where are we, guys? Okay, so, all right. Am I on YouTube or am I on? Oh, this is crazy. Oh, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. Oh, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. And I can hear myself twice. Oh, this is killing me. Where are we, guys? Okay, so, all right. Am I on YouTube or am I on? Oh, this is crazy. Oh, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. Oh, this so stinks. This stinks so bad. And I can hear myself twice. Oh, this is killing me. Where are we, guys? Okay, so, all right. Am I on YouTube or am I on? Oh, this is crazy. I am just clicking like crazy right now and hearing myself talk over and over again, which is really weird. So I'm just going to start talking, and hopefully this will get us somewhere. Okay. Hi to everybody. I'm so glad that something is working, and I'll look back on this and I'll laugh, and I'm trying to not waste your time, so let's get going. I'm glad you guys went ahead and said hi. I'll keep my YouTube dashboard here open so that I can always see your questions. Here we go. So I'm really enjoying seeing everybody's stuff. YouTube dashboard. Grr, let me hush myself. This is madness. And so what I thought we'd do today is kind of work backwards, and even though, I mean, you trace, you paint, you scan, you vectorize, you lay it out, a lot of the questions are coming at the back end, maybe because this is such a simple process, and I tried to keep the class simple, so that's okay to say. So a lot of the questions are coming towards the end or about the end. So I'll address those and then kind of work backwards and talk about painting at the end if we have time. I am, I heard someone say that, the fun part's over with painting, and kinda, but not really. I mean, it's still gonna be fun to put everything together. Oh my goodness, this is so fun because I'm trying to keep track of video and recording myself. I'm obviously a newbie at this. So when I'm aligning, I think Jean said that she wanted some hints with aligning her text. As you know, you can't just hit the good old align button. Once you have all your letters together, you'll end up, with your letter I aligning to the bottom of the letter Y or something like that. So what I do is I bring down a guide from the top, from the ruler, and align my letters that way. So let me get a pencil. So if this is my guide, that O or that U is going to dip just under this and just under that, but say something like the letter B or the letter D, the round part is going to dip underneath, whereas if it's a serif font, the little leg is going to hit right on that axis. So that's really complicated speak for talking about aligning text. Some people can talk on and on and on and on about this kind of stuff, and I love Ellen Lupton. She's kind of my typography guru. And, you know, I was trying to think what's the easiest way to do this. And just laying out your letters so that you can use them. And I would think that it's actually to type it out. So you started with a font, why not use that same font? So when you're in Photoshop or Illustrator, wherever you're laying out your words to make a quote or some sort of text or whatever, to type out what you want to say, lay it out with the font, drag your letters on top and align them perfectly if you want them to be just the way it would be if it were typed, and then delete that layer that had the text on it. I think that that's like a super easy way to do it. And for those of you who love the way it looks just kind of crazy and mixed up, more power to you. You don't need to hear all this. Another question I had was about, what was it? Cleaning up your letters. I think I'm working well enough backwards here. Making sure I'm not missing any of your lovely comments. Again, hi, I can see you. I'm so glad we can see each other. Okay, so we talked about laying it out. Let's talk about, I'm breezing through this so that we can have more of a, I don't know, conversation later. Talking about cleaning them up, but you know what, I skipped the vector part. Let's talk about the vector part. Is anyone having trouble grouping their letters and doing all that? I'm gonna go ahead and guess that some of you are, so I just keep talking. So in that case, let's talk about scanning. All right, when I scan at 300 dpi. Something that I told someone on their project, and it turns out this wasn't the issue they were having, but if it's helpful to you, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. When you scan your work and you bring it into Photoshop and you've got your letters all painted and you realize you get some of that texture of the watercolor paper, I'm going to be talking more in depth about that in my next class, which is exciting. But I play with the levels or play with the brightness. There's a million ways to do one simple thing in Photoshop, and everyone's got their one shtick of how they like to do it. So the gist of it is to play with the contrast. Now, once you have all your background white in Photoshop, I like to actually fill that in with a color that is not in my piece at all. So with my pink and orange letters, I made the background bright turquoise blue. So that way, when I brought it into Illustrator, I could easily select the turquoise blue and get it out of there and delete them. Sometimes you have these like nice white gaps within your work, your watercolor work, and you want to keep those. So when you select all the white in the background, you lose those too, and you can, you know, you can put them in later or whatever. But that's a trick that I use to make the whole background a ridiculous, you know, like bright magenta or yellow or black if that's not in my artwork. And that way when I go into Illustrator and I go to image trace and I trace it at high res, full res, and make my computer really angry at me, it won't pick up on the pieces that I want to keep in my work. And in this case, it would be the letters themselves. Does that make sense? To delete everything so that then you have your millions of little vector pieces, and then with the lasso tool to select each letter and Command G, group it, and select each letter and Command G, group it, and do that work. So someone had asked me, how do you, another question was, how do you keep yourself from tinkering like crazy in Photoshop or even when you're painting? This person was, their paper was about falling apart because they just kept reworking that watercolor. Watercolor is just not made to be reworked. It can be reworked a lot more than people give it credit, but that's that's just kind of what's unique about it. I mean, if you're more of a tinker, I'm guessing your bent is going to be more towards like oil paints or something like that, where you can really render and paint for a long time. So yeah, I guess at some point you have to let it be. And if you are a tinker, I would save your letters as they are, and then do another file, save as, so that you can really, you know, work on making, I don't know, those gradient transitions smooth, or whatever it is that you want to do with your piece. And that way you have, you know, when you write out the word, I can only think of, I'm looking around at words. I don't know, if you write my name, Amaryllis, it has 2 A's. That way you have 1 A that has like this bent on it, and 1 A that has this bent on it. And I like to do that too with color variations. So I've got maybe an alphabet that's a little more on the orange side, a little more on the pink side. And so when I'm putting things together, I'm copying and pasting from both to break it up a bit, and it doesn't feel like a font as much. So it feels more hand-done or more original. So I can't see you guys, so unless I go to Google Hangouts, which then I'll get to hear my voice twice, which is not that fun. So please ask questions in the feed box, and in my ramblings, I will incorporate them here. All right, I see Christy's question about gouache. Instead of watercolor for this project, you use gouache. Do I find that one is better than the other for color intensity and blending? The strength of gouache is flat color. You can say the same for acrylic paint, in that acrylic is also good with flat colors, but then you get that satiny, no, it's even more, I mean, it's latex, that plasticky finish. And with gouache, you can go in and reactivate it with a little water. I think watercolor is better with blending. You get more crazy blends because the water, I mean, the paint is thinner than gouache is. I look at my watercolor palette, which someone asked me where I got it. It's Mission Gold. That's what I use most of the time. This does not come with the palette. That's usually white. that's me bringing inks into the mix and needing a spot to put them on. But when you look at these kind of bleeds and things like that, if that's what you're going for, then watercolor is the way to go. I don't know if you guys have seen Rifle Paper Company's stuff. She uses gouache, and so it's these florals that they're mostly like shapes, and you could vectorize them. It's somewhere between, gouache I would say is somewhere between acrylic and watercolor. So watercolor will blend more fluidly. Acrylic you can't rework later. And I've pulled my hair out with gouache before, but that was 10 years ago, now that I think of it. So I should give it a shot again. So, all right, cool. Opaque watercolors. When you mean opaque watercolors, do you mean like these that come in a bottle, Sarah? Or do you mean tube? I would just for a quick run through about watercolor media. The two that I used, like I said, are usually Mission or these. These are the Dr. P.H. Martin's concentrated watercolor. So a drop of it in a palette, UI water, and you've got color for, you know, your whole session or more. I'm trying to think what you mean by opaque watercolors. And then tubes are what I have in my palette there. I see a lot of you use those palettes that are like hard circles. And those are good too. I've seen professionals use those. I really like the brand that I use because I like really intense colors. And so those are the kind that I use. The palette you got is called Opaque. Yeah, I don't know. I would guess that, I'm guessing it's because they're pans. Maybe that's what they mean. All watercolors are, you know, just concentrated color that you add water to, whether it be a pan or tubes or in liquid form. And so maybe what they mean by opaque is because they're pans. So, cake watercolors, there you go. Problems, okay, Roxanne, I'm reading your question now. I'm having problems with the painting part. I find that my colors are not blending and it just looks like two separate colors. Do you have any tips for painting? I wish I had a camera like right on me, because I have art students here that I tutor, and whenever they ask me a question, I'm like, okay, I just got to show you. Having trouble with things blending. I would think, I'm thinking of a couple of things that could be happening there. There might be too much water put down. Someone asked me, how much water should I use when I'm just, you know, painting with water like I did at first with the wet on wet technique. So you paint with water and then you bring in the paint. I would only use enough water for it not to dry by the time I put the paint in. So we're not looking at using a ton of paint that's just sitting on the paper and then we dab color in and it kind of swirls around and we're waiting to see what's going to become of it. I use a lot of water when I'm doing like a long cursive word, and I want to be sure that when I'm adding paint over here, this isn't drying over there. And so those are times when I use a lot of water, but use very little water. And then when you go back to get your paint, do water to paint just to reactivate that paint again, and get your brush really soaked with that paint. At this point, you really don't need the water just so much as it's a medium, a catalyst to get it onto your paper, because you've already got the water on the paper. So you really just want a lot of color on your brush. Dip it in, and it should bleed, you know, just come off that brush nicely. If it's not doing that, I'm afraid that maybe the quality of the paints that you have aren't very good. In every watercolor tube, or really even color pencils, paint, anything. This is actually a brand that I don't really care for. I got these while we lived in China. But I was really excited when I found them. Inside you have pigment and you have binders that make the pigment, which, you know, begins in a powder form, work, you know, so you can paint. So different paints, different brands have different percentages of how much pigment you have versus how much binder you have. And so the inexpensive paints have more binder in them. They have fillers. I mean, just like when you think about food, not that that's necessarily a shtick for me, but, you know, I think of it that way too, where you have a lot of fillers, and then you have some of the good stuff, and obviously higher quality food has a lot of the good stuff and a little bit of what, you know, keeps it in the box for however long. So that would be my tip. On Instagram, every so often I paint quick captures of my work in progress. If you want to see those and just try to see if you can gain anything from just watching me paint, you can go to Instagram. My handle is Watercolor Devo. So watercolor, no space, D-E-V-O. And you'll see some videos there. Hit click, hopefully hit play, maybe you'll see some pointers there for when you're painting. So, all right, fun stuff. The difference is that there is white mixed with pigment. Ooh, that's another thing. Yes, for sure. All right, any other questions? I hope I didn't skip anything. So if I am skipping something, you just retype it or say, hey, look up here. Is there a recommended amount of water to dilute watercolor paint? Laurel asked. Mine was super thick in the tube. but I think I may have overwatered it. Is there a certain consistency you look through, or you look for? With how much water, so how do I answer that without showing you? I think I'll just show you. I think I'll just show you. Let me get some paper out. I always have paper out with me. There's some paper. And I always have water, and I always have paint. So I'm a mom of a 3 and a 5-year-old. So I always have my stuff out. So when it's time for me to paint, it's go time, and I don't have to wait around. All right, so it's going to be fun is showing you my palette right side up. Okay, so I always get my my brush wet. This is so fun. It's crazy. Yeah, you don't have to see my face. Let's do this. All right, I've got my water. I'll keep that on this side so you know when I go this way, I'm getting water. I've got my paint over here. Get it in the corner there. There we go. All right, so I'm dipping my brush in the water. This is a pretty big honking brush to make sure that you can see everything I'm doing. It's a number 24 round. I like round because when you press down, you get a thick line, and when you let up, you get a thin line. So I'm gonna go with a color that I just have a ton of right here, this pink. So I'm getting my paint wet. So right now, since I stroked it so much, my brush has a ton of color on it. And then, obviously, if I want it lighter, I add more water. These are watercolor basics, I'm sure you know that. I'm getting lighter and lighter, but see, there's still paint on my brush. I would recommend, if you want something that's darker, to err on darker. So if I'm doing the letter, I was gonna do S, even though it's gonna be back upside down for you guys. Okay, so I have a ton of paint, a ton of water on my brush right now. And if I have the feeling that, ooh, I have got way too much paint on this right now, I want it to look more translucent, like, let's say, my second S. Then all I do is wash my brush out. Some people use paper towels right on their paintings. I think it's a little risky if you don't have a super steady hand to suck it up. But a paintbrush will do just fine. And I take away some of that and extend it so that I keep working. So basically I'm using the same amount of paint for a larger area. So that way I have a lighter color. To go back to that blending question, if your colors aren't blending, it's either not wet enough or too wet. If it's too wet, let me get some of this pink off of here. If it's too wet, it's just going to puddle. Again, I really like this brand of paint, so it's not going to puddle as much. But if it's too wet, it's just going to puddle, and we're going to wait forever, and they're going to end up pretty light. But if I'm going too dry, and these are all things that, you know, you, of course, will get the hang of, and watching a video might be fun, but there's nothing like learning it offhand. Right now, I'm using pretty much opaque color. So if it's too dry, you can always reactivate it with a little water. That would be a lot of water there. I'm using a huge brush again, so it soaks up a lot of water quickly. Right now, my letter S is obviously just one color. I'm not doing that blending of two colors. I'm going to go ahead and do another video of that. And I say another one because, I don't know, I think it's basically what I did on the video lesson, but let's do it. I'll paint in water and then I'll add 2 colors on either side. So I guess, again, I'm going to do the letter S. It's dirty water. It should be just water, but it's still got some color in it. Because again, these paints I use are so rich. There's a price for that, of course. I'm drying it out because this is too wet for me. And now I'm going to go in with the red orange, go in at the top. It's not blending for me, it's just staying right there. And that would be because I don't have enough paint on my brush or enough water. But I know that there's more water around this curve here. So I'm just going to chillax about that and let it bleed. I'll just use the word chillax. And then pink here at the end and let it blend. I act like watercolor is magical and it'll just do it for you. There's a lot of guidance going on here. But in the end, this will dry lighter than what it looks. The trick about watercolor, or a way that it tricks us, is that it goes on darker and dries lighter. And so a lot of times when I find that that's happening, you know, I'm really excited about the way something looks. And then once it's dry, it kind of fell flat. I go in and I do a shadow or something to make it punch again. A little known fact about watercolor is that you can and should layer. So we think watercolor painting is this thing that just kind of happens and voila, and it does look great. But if you want some serious intensity and things aren't going the way you want, it's totally expected and totally cool to layer. If your paper can handle it, go for it. If you're using paper that's not very thick and it's gonna give out on you, then obviously you wanna get some thicker paper and try again. All right, so someone was asking about the brand of brush I use. I don't really have a preferred brand quite yet. I just rush off to Hobby Lobby and get them if they're on sale. So these are the Hobby Lobby brand Master's Touch. And every once in a while I do clean them out because I'm dealing with pigments, and even though I rinse them out, they're still in there. It might not be as visible as with like acrylic paint or something, but they're still there. So, all right, let's see. Brand of brush, got that one. That comment is directed to Sarah, so I'm not gonna look. Yes, so the brand I use is called Mission Gold, and I actually learned that from Katie Rogers, who does paper fashion, the paper fashion blog, or at least that's her, I don't know, brand. She's a fashion illustrator. Mine out of the tube was about as thick as acrylic. Yes, I have used paints like that before. And yeah, I have a palette where right now I have some of it dry on there, and I don't think I'm going to use it anymore. It's just not, they're not blending, and they're kind of acting more like wash than watercolor. So if I wanted to go thicker, I guess that would work. That would be fine. But yeah, bummer. It is what it is. I'm glad that you guys were here. I have a few more minutes still. I only signed up for like a 45-minute session instead of a full hour, just to be sure that things would go okay. But since we started a little early, I'm glad to stay on for a little longer if you have questions about how to go about your alphabet. So it's been exciting to see the different languages and colors, and yeah, if you change something on your project, it would help me a ton if you make your main image your latest picture of your piece, because I'll see, you know, just the thumbnails and I'll be like, okay, I saw that, I saw that, I saw that. But maybe I haven't seen the, you know, the painted trace letters or whatever, because it's not the main picture anymore. And you know what, if I'm still missing your project and you're not sure that I saw it, don't feel like you're bothering me, go ahead and let me know. Do you find that Mission stays sticky in the palette? I have a sample red and it stays weirdly sticky when everything else is dry. It does. It is a little sticky. You're right. I do find that. When it comes to, like, if you're going for classic colors, I think Winsor and Newton, I get those mixed up. Winsor and Cotman. Those are great, like, staple colors. If you're going for bright colors, like, for instance, my favorite colors to work in are opera pink and turquoise. So those are pretty bright. Lately, I've been going into a little more green, like a bluish green. And so that's why I use Mission and Dr. P.H. Martin's. Those are a little harder to wrangle, and I could probably talk for a while about those too, because you're dealing with liquid, and it's a recipe for all kinds of fluid fun and disasters if you don't feel confident with a lot of wet medium. So, all right. I really wish I could see your faces. I'm glad that you guys are here. Let me know if you have any more questions. I'm trying to scroll through, make sure that I don't miss anything here. And mostly what I had thought about addressing were those digital issues that kind of got out of the way right away. What watercolor paper am I using? So I think I might have said on the video, but just to give you a visual, I just use Canson. It's 150 pound. I typically work in 9x12. I do a lot of greeting cards. So my work is as a commercial illustrator. And so what that means is I'm painting huge Christmas cards all the time and listening to Christmas music on my record player. And I send my work to my agent, and my agent then, you know, goes off and sells licenses to this artwork, and really just one license at a time to each piece. And so 9x12, that size, I think comes at about $10 for 30 sheets. Yeah, $10 for 30 sheets that are 9x12. I, you know, just like any other watercolorist, I love arches and, you know, the papers that come in a block because they're nice and taut and they don't warp or anything like that. But since most of my work is just being scanned and sent somewhere instead of hanging up somewhere, I go with that. I like that the white is bright. A lot of times watercolor papers, or any papers, they'll be a little off-white, and I like the whites to be white because when it comes to watercolor, that's going to be your brightest white. So look for bright whites. Look for cold press. I recommend cold press over hot press. Hot press is a little rougher. And so especially if you're scanning your work and vectorizing it, you'll get, you know, bleeds that look more like little spider webs, and you don't want that when your paper has a lot of texture to it. It's cold press. Funny, I just answered that. Yeah, I use Bristol sometimes when it's just hand lettering, but it's just as expensive as this paper. So if it's the same price, I just go ahead and get that kind. And yeah, it's been good to me. I'll show you now how much it warps. So this is actually the same pad. I just took the top off. So you see that it did warp a little bit for me, but it's not anything terrible. If I did want to frame and mat my cool S's and stripes, I could just, you know, press it down well enough, and I don't need to worry about that too much. So, anything else? You get to ask me anything. I'm like in the hot seat. It's fun. If not, we're right at 3:15. I'm sure someone is typing, so I'll take that one last question. All right, when you're working digitally, do you use a trackpad, mouse, or digital pen? None of the above. Well, yeah, trackpad. I just work off my laptop, which is really bad because I have carpal tunnel issues sometimes. But the Apple mouse, I find it so like, whoa, slippery. And yeah, I've just gotten used to working that way. So I've used watercolor pencils before, Daria. They, you know, it's like I like the idea of traveling with them, but it doesn't have the fluid feel to it that I like. So basically, if you haven't used watercolor pencils before, you draw. They look just like color pencils. You draw with them, and then whenever you have water, you kind of activate those colors, and they bleed, which is nice. But what I find is that watercolor pencils, I mean, they have to have wax in order for them to be pencils. So we were talking about binders before, the things that, you know, make our paint stick together so that we can use them. I got a little watercolor on my white desk here. And so since for pencils they use wax, it doesn't bleed as much as I would like it to. So I don't use watercolor pencils very much. I am thinking about, though, trying watercolor markers. They cost a pretty penny, so I'm still thinking about it because I'm not sure if I'm really gonna like it. But that's another fun thing to Google if you're interested in it, and kind of trying something that you can take on the go. So, oh, this has been fun, very fun. Trying to jog my brain, make sure that there's nothing that I'm sure once I hang up I'll think, I should have mentioned that. And if I do, forgive me, I'm just going to send another announcement out so you'll get another email. Because once my brain gets going, I'll kind of be thinking about this while I'm doing the dishes and things like that. Thank you guys for joining the class. The class is only as good as the students actually, producing the projects. And so it's just been fun for me to watch. And this is my first Skillshare class. So I'm enjoying the experience. And like I said, I'm developing the next course. And it's going to be more in the vein of illustration and walking you through that industry, at least commercial illustration, if you're interested in that. And we'll have a brief, which is basically the project outline that I'll sometimes get from my agents and that say, manufacturers are looking for this. This is so cool right now. Can you do anything that has X, Y, and Z, kind of like this? And we'll talk about how to break that down, how to create original work that's also marketable, aka trendy. And so it'll be a longer course. Not like this 14-minute class. It should actually be about 13 minutes because there's a snippet that's repeated. But thank you guys. I'm finally looking at the camera instead of at my browser. Thank you for joining me in my love for watercolor. And bummer that you can't be side by side with me and we could paint together. But this is about as close as we can get, and that's a good time to me. So thanks for getting on the video and for suffering through my little tech issues. If you have any questions, just post them on your project, and I will respond. Looking forward to the session going on. I'm a little sad that when it closes, I have to pick a winner, but yay for that person who'll get a year membership of Skillshare and a mug with their watercolor quote design on it. So I'll see you guys in the discussion group. Okay, bye.